It starts with barren land. The soil stimulates, enlivens the mind of a master. On the vacant page, a genius creates. It must be more than just walls, rooms, and a roof, more than a building, an office, more than just grass and trees. It's a place to learn, reside, inspire. It must graciously coexist with its environment, complement the landscape, and respect and embellish its surroundings. It is a skill that requires imagination and craftsmanship. The artist is the architect, and Arizona is the birthplace and home of one of America's premier artist architects.
I'm Bennie Gonzales. I'm an Arizona architect. My uncle was S.L. Cahill. He was a local contractor in Phoenix, and he was very close with my father. They were both partners in a little construction company, and my uncle's sons were in the construction company, and it was a wonderful place for me to start off with. My dad died when I was 7, and my uncle took me under his wing and took me to his construction jobs along with my cousins, and I became very closely allied to the construction trade.
At age 8, Bennie was put to work on one of Arizona's landmark structures.
The thing that took my interest was these fellows were making little wood forms, and they were the forms that Frank Lloyd Wright had designed for the block that's on the face of the Biltmore. And so one of the fellows took me over there where they were pouring concrete into the forms, and he says, here. They opened up one of the forms, and he says, now take and cover these little cracks with a little spatula. And so I feel very close to the Biltmore from that standpoint, of course.
A stint in the Coast Guard during World War II provided an opportunity for Bennie to study architecture around the world.
The architecture, of course, was a very natural thing for me to go to these cities, in Europe and in San Francisco, New York, and all of those areas, and I was very interested in it. Of course, I had a good fundamental knowledge of building, and the aesthetics of architecture started to grow on me. And when I came back to Phoenix, I decided to go to school at ASU.
After graduating from the ASU architectural program, Bennie decided to continue his studies south of the border in a land where the ancient architecture had long fascinated him.
And I thought perhaps I should do some postgraduate work at the university, and I went to Mexico, and of course it was a revelation for me because the Mexican architect was a lot looser than the American architect, who was bound by all of the building codes, etc. And the architect in Mexico was considered more of an artist than a builder type of a person. Going to Mexico and visiting those pyramids, and all the way from Cancun to Tulum and the other areas, and I saw the wonderful masonry that they could do, these what we felt were uneducated people 1,000 years before we came along, and doing this fantastic building.
Bennie garnered the wisdom of these early masters and went on to study under many of Arizona's prominent architects of the era. Shortly after, he landed a solo project that was very close to his heart.
Well, the Nogales Library, of course, was my mother's birthplace, and when I was asked to do the library, I had done a couple of houses in Nogales, and one of the owners of one of the houses I did was on the library board, and he asked me if I wouldn't want to do the library, so it was quite a credit to me to be allowed to do something like that.
After the privilege of crafting a landmark in his mother's birthplace, Bennie procured another project with family ties.
Well, my uncle, with his contractor partner, built the original Heard house. So it was a great honor for me when the Heard Museum Board asked me to do the additions, because nothing had been done to it at the time, and they wanted to keep it in its original context And of course, it was a natural for me, having worked with the people and knew what it was about. So it was a great adventure for me to be able to work on something that my uncle and cousins had worked on.
An innovative style was beginning to emerge. With respect to his acquired Mexican and Southwestern influences, Bennie was developing a unique contemporary flavor to his designs. The architectural world was taking note, and bigger ventures would soon come his way. One being the glorious Scottsdale Civic Center, perhaps the most magnificent and enchanting municipal hub in the country. In the early 80s, after attaining an unequaled status in his field, Bennie became disenchanted with the continuous battles with building inspectors and decided to take his career and life in a new direction.
And I said, I want to do my own thing now. I took my Mercedes and traded it in for a pickup, and took my suits and ties and traded them in for Levi's and and T-shirts, and left and came to Mazatlan, went to Mazatlan, where I really was a free spirit for years, actually. And
after designing a number of beachfront hotels to pay the bills, Bennie headed back to Nogales and built his dream home, where he sculpts, paints, and occasionally takes on a project of his liking. Although his career in architecture has voluntarily slowed down, Bennie is the first to tell you he is far from retired.
I think, hey, I'm 72 now. I'm getting there. And then I think of two of my biggest heroes. One was Picasso, and the other one was Frank Lloyd Wright for his independence. And they were both 92. They died at that age, and they were still working at that age. And I hope that, for some stroke of luck, that I'll be around for 92, and I'll be wondering what I'm going to do in the next 20 years. I think that that's the big opportunity.
But for now, Arizona can be thankful for the contributions Bennie has made in his first 72 years. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Arizona history maker Bennie Gonzales.